then on me to make another video. Everybody wants more videos. I said, I don't really know what to make a video of. And they said, well, why don't you show people the difference between a Sweet 16 and a standard 16 brownie. I said, well, that's easy. Right there, it says Sweet 16. So you know that's a Sweet 16. This is easy. Here's a standard 16. It doesn't say anything. That's a standard 16. Now see, that was pretty easy. That's the difference. But there are other differences between a standard and a Sweet 16. This is an older model here of a standard. This gun, oh, no telling when it was made, probably in the early 50s or so. It's a classic standard 16. Here's the barrel to this gun, and this gun has the right barrel with it. A lot of times barrels get swapped around. I know that because on this old standard, it has the serial number on the barrel. And they did this up till 1953. They would stamp the serial number on the barrel. And they also stamped serial numbers on the carrier screws. Right there, if you can see there, there's numbers on those carrier screws. That is the serial number of the gun. And also, if you were to take these trigger plate screws out, you will see that stamped along the inside, along the shank of the screw, will also be the serial number of the gun. And then after a while, somebody probably asked the question, why do we do that? Because all the barrels interchange, the screws, they pretty much interchange. There's really no difference in them. So why in the world would you put, the serial number on the screws? And why would you need the serial number on the barrel? Here's where they put it right here on the barrel ring. And so finally someone, apparently in a focus group meeting or something, said, I really don't know why we're doing that. And they said, yeah, why do we? Let's quit doing that. It's not necessary because these barrels all interchange. This is a Sweet 16 barrel here. It'll go on this standard 16 just fine. And vice versa. I can put this standard barrel on the Sweet 16 I've got laying there. So all the A5 barrels are pretty much the same. There's really not too much difference. Now, in the old standard 16s, when they went to the Sweet 16, the idea was to make it lighter. And you see the barrel on the standard 16 here. There's no holes drilled in the barrel ring. There are holes drilled in the Sweet 16 barrel ring. That's to keep down on weight. And this barrel for the Sweet 16, even though it has a rib on, is still a little bit lighter than the standard 16. Now, they also made plain barrels for the Sweet 16, of course, but they would always have they call them a matte rib barrel. We've talked about this before. They're just a plain barrel, but they have some matting going down the top of the barrel to break up light, supposedly. But they're one and the same barrel. These barrels all interchange. So to look at the standard 16 again, this early gun, as you can see, has what we call the early suicide safety, the front safety. They got away from that. Now the first few Sweet 16s they made, they continued on with this front safety, the suicide safety. Then after a few years they went to the crossbolt safety, like you see in this Sweet 16 here, which is much better. Your finger out of that trigger guard is a lot safer. Crossbolt safety is so much safer and easier. In the heat of the battle, if I were shooting at a ringneck pheasant or woodcock or whatever in the heat of the battle, I couldn't remember if I was pushing or pulling. So they went to the crossbolt safety. So here's the big difference between the standard and the Sweet 16. It's more so than just what it says on the receiver. It's a little more to it than that. They cut down on weight. Now for the wood, they would channel out the inside of the wood on the Sweet 16s to make them weigh less. Here's a cutaway gun we have. You can see we cut this stock down through the middle here. You see how they've removed some wood here. And the wood adds to the weight a lot on these guns. They use the lighter French walnuts so they don't weigh as much. And on the Sweet 16s, they would channel out the stock to cut down on weight. The forearms were basically the same. They never really changed. So the change was in the stock. Now, here's something else, and most people don't realize this, and they don't see it. You'll know what I'm talking about after today. If the camera guy can zoom in, it's going to be a little hard to see, maybe. Down inside the receiver here, Now I don't know how well it's going to show up. There are some milling cuts made inside of this Sweet 16. And the idea in that was to cut down on weight. If you take the trigger plate out, you'll see some cuts made back in the back. So they took a milling cutter and they channeled out the receiver, removing some weight to make it weigh less. Now a lot of guys don't realize that. But if you look at the standard 16, and this is a one-piece carrier. By the way, the speed load system was a great improvement too. The early Sweet 16s that had still had the suicide safety, many of them still had the one-piece carrier, which meant, to load the gun, you had to kind of be in an awkward position, push the button, and push the carrier down. Whereas the speed load, of course, you just pop the round right down without having to push on any buttons. It's a wonderful, wonderful improvement. So the get this out of the way. Down the side of the receiver here, you can see it's all just kind of flat in here. There's no cuts been made. See the difference? See the cuts down in here? That's another thing they did to lighten up the gun, make the Sweet 16. Okay, now these guns, when they're together, we weighed the two of them, the standard 16, and we weighed this Sweet 16. And even though the Sweet 16 has a vent rib barrel on it, it still weighs a ½ pound less than the standard 16s. So that's the difference between them. It's all about weight. If you're like me, I hate carrying a heavy gun around with me. That's awful. I want a lightweight gun. So the Sweet 16 was just made up to be to cut back on weight, and it made them a little. Later on they adopted the split carrier, and of course they went to the gold-plated trigger and the crossbow, and this Sweet 16 here weighs 7 pounds. This standard weighs 7 pounds 8 ounces. We have weighed them, and I can feel the difference. You pick them up, you'll see right off. There's just a difference. Now this old standard 16s, this is a great old gun. It's all still hand engraved. In fact, the engraving on this one's chiseled very nice and nice and deep. Actually, I think the engraving on this standard is a little better than the Sweet 16. The Sweet 16 is not quite as deep. Now, engraving, it just depends on who was engraving the gun that day and the mood he was in or his style of engraving. But this old standard here has very nice engraving, and this pattern on this one side is actually a little longer and a little more. It's just I don't know. I like engraving better on the standard actually, but each to his own. So let's see what else I can tell you about the standards and Sweet 16s. Now there are, the predecessor of the standard 16s, of course, and we've talked about them before, I believe, were the old short chamber 209 16th gun, and they look basically the same. You can't really tell much difference. You pick up an old early gun. The early guns didn't have engraving on them. They were all just pretty slick on the sides and all, no engraving. You can spot the old short chambered guns by looking for the one-piece carrier and the suicide safety. And the main thing you look for on also the old standard or the old early short chamber guns had a fixed ejector. It doesn't slide like this one. This ejector slides. These the standard grades were or the short chamber guns, 209 16s, had a fixed ejector that was riveted in place. And to make the alteration, to alter them to a 2 3/4, you have to make a sliding ejector so it slides and it just makes the gun function. But this is these guns both, of course, are chambered for 2 3/4. So basically, that's the difference. The Sweet 16s are much more desirable, and they go for a whole lot more money. Standard 16s are kind of a slow sell. People just generally don't want them. They're heavier. They just don't have the looks of the Sweet 16s. They want vent rib barrels. Now you can still don't misunderstand me. These early standard 16s did come with ribs. They were a solid rib, and a lot of guys like those, and I do too. But for the most part, guys really prefer the Sweet 16s, lighter weight, vent rib barrels or matte rib barrels. The stocks have been channeled out, and so the Sweet 16s fetch a whole lot more money than a standard 16. And so anyway, that's just some of the differences between the standard and the Sweet 16.